The first thing I saw was the wooden letter E in my husband's hand. Daniel stood on a step stool in the nursery, taking down our daughter's name one letter at a time. The V and the I were already on the floor. Across the dresser, 4 new blue letters waited in a neat row. No. His pregnant ex-girlfriend, Tessa, sat in my mother's oak rocking chair with both hands resting on her stomach. Someone had tied a pale blue ribbon around the chair back. About 15 people were crowded into the room and the hallway, holding cupcakes and champagne. One woman still had her phone raised, recording. "Rachel," Daniel said. "You're home early." Tessa's smile slipped. "Daniel said you were ready to let the room go." I tried to take a picture, but my hand jerked and the first shot was a white blur. I took another. Then I photographed Tessa's suitcases in the guest room and the contractor's invoice beside the crib. Daniel stepped down and put himself between Tessa and me. "Don't do this here," he said. "Tessa needs this room more than you do right now." 7 weeks later, strangers would take possession of that house. Daniel would stand in the driveway with the last key in his palm and ask me where he was supposed to go. But that afternoon, he still believed the house belonged to him. For a few seconds I couldn't get enough air to answer. The paper moon hanging over the crib turned slowly in the breeze from the vent. I had painted that moon with my mother at our kitchen table before cancer made it hard for her to hold a brush. Tessa shifted in the rocker. The wood gave its familiar little complaint beneath her weight. "Maybe we should give them a minute," a woman near the door said. Daniel's mother, Linda, frowned at her. "Rachel just needs a chance to understand." Understand? I looked at the invoice again. New paint, custom shelving, furniture assembly, labor. The total at the bottom was $12,480, billed to the checking account Daniel and I used for household expenses. There was a pink fingerprint in the corner of the paper, probably frosting. I picked up the invoice and folded it once. Daniel reached for it. "That's not, give me that." I stepped back too fast and hit the dresser. A jar of cotton swabs tipped over and scattered across the floor. "Did you tell these people I agreed to this?" I asked. "I told them you've been having a hard time." "That's not what I asked." "Rachel, come on." He glanced toward the hallway, more embarrassed by the audience than by anything I had found. "We can talk downstairs." Tessa pressed a hand to the small of her back and stood. She was 8 months pregnant, all narrow shoulders and a round belly under a cream-colored dress. I had met her twice before. Both times, Daniel had introduced her as an old friend going through a rough separation. "I didn't mean for you to find out this way," she said. "Which part?" My voice cracked on the last word. "The party, the room, or the luggage?" She looked at Daniel. That look answered more than either of them did. Daniel rubbed both hands over his face. "She needs somewhere stable until the baby comes. You weren't using the room. We weren't using it. Her name was on the wall. Evie is gone, Rachel." Someone in the hallway whispered, "Oh God." Another person walked away. The woman with the phone lowered it, though not before I saw the red recording light. Daniel heard what he had said a second too late. His mouth opened, but I was already bending to pick up the E from the floor. The edge dug into my palm. I held on anyway. "I know she's gone," I said. "I was there." Tessa's face tightened. "Daniel told me you had been talking about turning this into a guest room." "He lied." "Rachel," Daniel snapped. "Did he also tell you that chair belonged to my mother?" Tessa stood up completely then. The ribbon snagged on a spindle and came loose, dragging one end across the floor. Linda moved toward me. "Sweetheart, nobody is trying to erase Evie. This could be healing for the whole family." "Whose family?" She stopped. I walked past Daniel and into the guest room. 2 hardshell suitcases stood open on the bed. Dresses hung in half of the closet. A bottle of prenatal vitamins sat beside my mother's old ceramic lamp. On the floor was a shipping box addressed to Tessa Monroe at my address. Daniel hadn't fumbled an offer of emergency help. He had already moved her in. I photographed the box in the closet. Daniel followed me. "Will you stop taking pictures like I committed a crime? How long has she been staying here?" 3 nights. I turned around. "I worked late 3 nights this week." "Exactly. You were barely here." For one stupid second I thought he might hear himself and take it back. He didn't. Tessa appeared behind him with one hand braced against the doorframe. He said you were staying with a friend most nights anyway. I stayed with Monica twice last month because Daniel said he needed space. Can we please stop doing this in front of everybody? Daniel asked. You invited everybody. I walked downstairs. The living room looked like a catalog version of a baby shower. Blue balloons, white flowers, tiny bottles of sparkling cider, gifts arranged around the fireplace. A banner over the mantel read "Welcome, Baby Noah." Our wedding photograph had been taken down to make room for it. I found the photograph face down on the dining room sideboard. That was the third picture I took. The guests avoided my eyes as I crossed the room. A man I recognized from Daniel's office put his plate down and quietly told his wife they should leave. Linda stayed upstairs with Tessa. Daniel came after me, lowering his voice as though volume were the problem. I was going to tell you tonight. After the party? After everyone left. So I could come home and discover a pregnant woman living here, but privately. She's not just some woman. There it was. Not an apology. A correction. I opened the small cabinet beside the stairs where I kept important household papers. The deed wasn't there. I remembered moving it to my mother's cedar box after we refinanced Daniel's car 2 years earlier. The box was upstairs in our bedroom. He blocked the bottom step. What are you doing? Getting something. You're upset. Yes, Daniel. That is an accurate observation. So don't make some huge decision while you're like this. I stared at him. Did you tell Tessa she could raise her baby in my house? Our house. Did you tell her? He looked toward the kitchen, where 2 guests were pretending to study the labels on wine bottles. I told her she would be safe here. That wasn't yours to promise. We're married. Stop talking like I'm a tenant. Did you ever read the deed? He gave a short, humorless laugh. I pay bills here. That isn't what I asked. His jaw tightened. My God, Rachel. You're really going to turn this into a property dispute, because I helped someone who's pregnant. I went around him. He caught my elbow, not hard enough to hurt but hard enough to stop me. Let go. He did. Several people saw it. One of them, Daniel's sister Amy, looked down at her drink. Upstairs, I put the cedar box on the bed and opened it with the little brass key I kept in my jewelry tray. The deed was under my mother's death certificate. My name appeared alone beneath the property description. Rachel and Pierce, formerly Rachel and Mercer. My mother had bought the house in 1998, after my father left and before housing prices in our neighborhood climbed beyond anything she could have imagined. She worked as a public school librarian and took in editing jobs at night to pay it off. When she died 3 years earlier, she left it to me without a mortgage. Daniel had cried in this bedroom after the funeral. He had held my face and said, "We'll take care of it the way she did." At the time I thought he meant the house. 10 months before the baby shower, I had been 22 weeks pregnant with our daughter. Evie had stopped moving on a Tuesday. By Thursday morning, I knew the exact pattern of water stains in the ceiling tile above a hospital bed I never wanted to see again. Daniel grieved differently. That was what I told myself when he stopped going to the support group after one meeting. He couldn't stand the nursery door open, but he got angry if I suggested packing anything away. He worked later. He slept with the television on. We learned how to move around each other without touching the place where we both hurt. I wasn't innocent in that distance. I had spent whole evenings in Evie's room, sitting on the rug with one of her unopened blankets in my lap. Some nights Daniel asked me to come downstairs and I said no. Other nights I wished he would ask and he didn't. Then Tessa called him. She and Daniel had dated for 2 years in college. Their breakup had become one of his favorite stories because, in his version, they were young enough to want different things and mature enough not to hate each other. When she moved back to the area, recently separated and pregnant, Daniel started taking her calls. At first he told me about them. "She's scared," he said one night while loading the dishwasher. "The baby's father isn't exactly stepping up. That's awful. I might bring her some groceries tomorrow." I had said, "Okay." For months afterward I would hate that word. Not because buying groceries was wrong, but because Daniel later stretched my okay until it covered every lie he needed it to cover. I put the deed, my mother's death certificate, and the wooden E into a canvas tote. From the closet I took enough clothes for 3 days. Forgot socks. I took 2 black shoes from different pairs. I left my coat hanging downstairs and didn't notice until I was halfway to Monica's apartment. Daniel called 9 times during the drive. On the 10th call, I answered through the car speakers. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Away from the baby shower." "Can you come back after you cool down?" "Is Tessa leaving?" He exhaled into the phone. "She has nowhere to go." "Then my answer is no. Rachel, you can't throw a pregnant woman onto the street. You moved her into my house without telling me." "Our house. Read the deed." I ended the call. 2 minutes later I realized I had driven 3 exits past Monica's neighborhood. Monica opened her apartment door wearing pajama pants and 1 rubber cleaning glove. She looked at my canvas tote, then at my face. "What happened?" I tried to say it. The sentence broke apart halfway through. "He gave her Evie's room." Monica pulled me inside without asking who I meant. I sat at her kitchen table while she made tea neither of us drank. I showed her the pictures. The first blurred one made me angry enough to delete it. Then I stopped. It showed exactly what my hands had been doing. "That's your mom's chair," Monica said. I nodded. Did he know? He helped me carry it upstairs. She took off the remaining cleaning glove and placed it on the counter. "What do you want to do?" "Sell the house." The answer came out before I had tested it in my head. Monica didn't cheer. She didn't tell me it was brilliant. She sat across from me and asked, "Do you want to sell it, or do you want him to believe you'll sell it?" I looked at the picture of the blue letters waiting on the dresser. I want no part of that house to become a reward for what he did. The next morning, Monica drove me to see Grace Hahn, a family law attorney she knew through the clinic. Grace's office was above a dentist, and the waiting room smelled faintly of peppermint and drywall dust. I had expected someone stern. Grace wore red reading glasses and kept apologizing because the printer jammed. She read the deed, asked when I inherited the property, and wanted to know whether Daniel's name had ever been added. No. Any mortgage? No. Major improvements paid from joint funds? Some. The kitchen counters. A new water heater. And apparently a nursery for his ex. Grace took off her glasses. The house began as separate inherited property. That matters. So do marital contributions and the fact that it's your shared residence. You can't change the locks tonight, and I don't want you draining joint accounts. But you are not trapped. Can I sell it? Yes, with the right steps. He may claim reimbursement or ask the court to preserve disputed funds. That's different from owning half the house. That was enough law for me. I signed the petition to begin the divorce. Then I opened a checking account in my name, redirected my paycheck, and downloaded 6 months of statements from the joint household account before Daniel could change the password. The charges went beyond the contractor's invoice. A crib, a stroller, 2 appointments at a prenatal imaging center, a deposit to a photographer, catering for the baby shower. Just over $18,000 in all. I stared at the prenatal charges longer than the others. Daniel had never attended a single follow-up appointment with me after we lost Evie. He said hospitals made him feel sick. Apparently not all hospitals. Grace told me to save the statements and let her handle communication. By noon, a process server had delivered the divorce petition at Daniel's office. At 12:17, he called from a number I didn't recognize. "You filed for divorce?" "Yes." "Over a room?" I pressed my fingers against my forehead. "If you still think this is about paint, there isn't anything useful for us to discuss. My mother says you humiliated Tessa in front of everyone. Your mother can represent you then. Don't be childish." I hung up and immediately called him back by mistake. My thumb slipped while I was trying to block the number. He answered on the first ring. "Rachel." I swore and ended the call. Monica laughed from the driver's seat for nearly a minute. It was the first sound all day that didn't hurt. That afternoon, I met a real estate agent named Janelle Ortiz at the house. Grace had sent Daniel's attorney formal notice that I needed access to evaluate and protect the property. Daniel was still at work. Tessa was gone, though her shampoo stood in our shower and a bowl of cut fruit sat uncovered in the refrigerator. Janelle moved through the rooms with a tablet, taking measurements and making practical comments about paint, curb appeal, and comparable sales. She did not say anything about the blue balloons until we reached the nursery. Do you want this room photographed as it is? She asked. I looked at Noah's letters on the dresser. Daniel had taken down the last E after I left. Evie's name was gone completely. No. I put on old clothes, found a screwdriver, and removed the new letters myself. Halfway through, I stripped one of the screws and had to sit on the floor while Janelle went to her car for pliers. When I reached for the rocking chair, I couldn't move it. Not physically. My hands were on the arms, but my body refused the next part. Janelle came back and stopped in the doorway. Want me to call your friend? I nodded. Monica arrived 20 minutes later. Together, we carried my mother's chair downstairs and loaded it into her SUV. I held the wooden knee against my chest while Janelle photographed the room empty. At 4:30, a sign company truck pulled up to the curb. Daniel arrived while the installer was driving the stake into the front lawn. He parked crooked across the driveway and got out without closing his door. What the hell is this? The installer looked at Janelle. Janelle looked at me. Keep going, I said. The mallet came down again. For sale. Daniel crossed the lawn before the installer could swing the mallet again. Take it down, he said. The installer rested both hands on the handle. Ma'am. Finish the job, Janelle said. She had positioned herself between Daniel and the sign without making a show of it. Daniel pointed at me. You don't get to sell our home because you're mad. The listing agreement is signed. Then unsign it. That isn't a thing. He turned on Janelle. She's not in her right mind. We lost a baby and she's been. Stop. My voice came out louder than I meant it to. A dog barked behind the neighbor's fence. You do not get to use Evie to explain what you did. His expression changed, but only for a second. I was trying to get you out of that room. By putting Tessa in it? By letting it have a purpose again. The sentence landed badly even on him. He tugged at his collar and looked past me toward the house. Where is she? He asked. I almost laughed. That's your first question? Tessa has a doctor's appointment. She'll be back soon. I don't want her seeing this and getting upset. The installer drove the stake the rest of the way into the lawn. Daniel flinched at every hit. Janelle handed him her business card. All showing requests will come through my office. You'll get the notice required by the temporary access agreement once the attorneys finish it. There is no agreement. There will be, I said. Or Grace will ask a judge to set one. He crumpled the card in his fist. So that's it? 6 years and you send an agent and a lawyer. You sent me home to a baby shower. Daniel's eyes flicked toward the neighboring houses. Curtains moved in at least 2 windows. He lowered his voice. Come inside. We'll talk without an audience. I had heard that request before. It always meant he wanted the privacy to say something he didn't want other people to remember. Send it through your attorney. I got into Monica's SUV. My mother's rocking chair was strapped in the back, one runner wrapped in an old beach towel. Daniel stood beside the for sale sign as we pulled away. He did not look angry anymore. He looked confused. For the next 4 days, he tried every version of the same argument. He left a voicemail saying Tessa would stay only until the baby was 6 weeks old. He emailed that selling now would be financially irresponsible. He sent a picture of our wedding day with no message. Then he texted at 2 in the morning. You don't actually want to lose your mother's house. That one kept me awake. He knew exactly which part of me to press. Grace and Daniel's attorney worked out a temporary arrangement by the end of the week. Daniel could remain in the house until a set move-out date. Janelle could schedule inspections and showings with notice. A portion of the proceeds would stay in escrow until we resolved any claim involving joint money spent on improvements. Neither of us could remove permanent fixtures or destroy records. Daniel signed because the alternative was an emergency hearing. He could not afford to miss from work. According to Grace, his attorney also explained that refusing every showing would not turn him into an owner. I didn't feel victorious when Grace called with the news. I was at the clinic, standing beside a printer that had jammed with 40 patient schedules inside it. A physical therapist was asking me whether Mrs. Keller's transportation had been moved to 3:30. My life had not paused to give me room for a clean reaction. Rachel? Grace asked. Are you there? Yes. Sorry. The printer is eating Wednesday. Do you understand the agreement? He has to allow showings. With notice, yes. Good. I hung up, fixed Mrs. Keller's ride, and cried in the supply closet for less than 2 minutes because someone needed a box of toner. The first showing was scheduled for Saturday morning. Janelle asked Daniel in writing to remove personal clutter and leave the property for 1 hour. When we arrived, his truck was gone. Tessa's car was still in the driveway. Maybe she left with him, I said. Janelle checked her phone. She was included in the notice. The prospective buyers were a couple named Ben and Marisol Vega. They had a 4-year-old son who spent the first 10 minutes opening every closet and announcing whether it was big enough for a fort. Marisol apologized each time. I told her not to worry. The house looked different through their eyes. The scuffed baseboard in the hallway, the window that stuck in the dining room, the patch of kitchen tile my mother and I had never managed to match. Not a shrine, not a weapon, just a house with good light and old plumbing. We reached the nursery and found the door locked. Janelle knocked. Tessa? We have a scheduled showing. After a moment the lock turned. Tessa stood in the doorway wearing one of Daniel's college sweatshirts. Her hair was wet, and the skin beneath her eyes looked bruised from poor sleep. I'm not comfortable with strangers in here, she said. Marisol took her son's hand and stepped back. Janelle kept her tone professional. The entire property is included in the showing. This is my baby's nursery. The words came so easily to her that I wondered how many times she had practiced them. No, I said. It's a room in a house that's for sale. Tessa looked at Ben and Marisol as if I had embarrassed her. I'm 8 months pregnant. I was told I could stay here. By someone who couldn't promise you the house. Daniel lives here. Daniel also knew about the showing. Her hand tightened around the door. Behind her, Noah's letters were back on the wall. Daniel must have bought another set. A framed ultrasound image stood on the dresser where Evie's lamp had once been. Marisol murmured something to Ben. They moved toward the stairs. I felt the sale slipping away before it had begun. Please wait, I said. I turned back to Tessa. You can stand in the hall for 5 minutes, or Janelle can document that access was refused and send it to both attorneys. Pick one. Tessa's eyes sharpened. You're enjoying this. I haven't enjoyed anything in this house for a long time. That answer sounded too polished as soon as it left me. I wished I could pull it back. Tessa gave a tiny, disgusted shake of her head, as if I had confirmed something Daniel had told her. Then Marisol's son squeezed between the adults and pointed into the nursery. Mom, this room has stars. Tessa stepped aside because it was easier than arguing in front of a child. The Vegas did not make an offer. Janelle told me not to take it personally. Buyers walked away for loose railings, traffic noise, paint colors, feelings they couldn't name. Still, I sat in Monica's car afterward and blamed myself for every minute of it. That evening, Linda added me to a new family group chat after I had left the old one. Her first message was 3 paragraphs long. She said Daniel was grieving too. She said Tessa's blood pressure had risen after the showing. She said a decent person did not weaponize shelter against an unborn baby. Daniel's cousin liked the message. An aunt wrote, "This has gone too far." Amy read everything and said nothing. I typed 6 different replies. I deleted all of them. Finally, I posted the photograph of the contractor's invoice and wrote, Daniel spent joint money, moved Tessa in, and gave away Evie's room without telling me. He also told all of you I agreed. I did not. Linda responded almost immediately. He said you discussed it. I wrote back. Ask him to show you the message where I agreed. No one replied for the rest of the night. 2 days later, Amy called me at work. Can we meet? She asked. About what? Not on the phone. I almost said no. Amy had stood in my hallway with a glass of champagne, while her brother dismantled my daughter's name. But refusing information because I disliked the messenger would have been satisfying for 10 seconds and stupid afterward. We met at a diner near the clinic. Amy had already ordered coffee and torn the paper sleeve from her straw into tiny squares. I'm sorry, she said before I sat down. For which part? She pushed her phone toward me. Start with these. The screenshots came from a family group I had never been part of. 3 weeks before the shower, Daniel had written, Rachel and I finally agreed it's time to use the nursery. Tessa will stay with us until she's back on her feet. Please don't make Rachel talk about the miscarriage at the shower. She wants the day to be about Noah. Linda had answered with a heart. Amy had offered to bring cupcakes. I believed him, Amy said. You'd been avoiding everybody. I thought maybe you didn't want to be there. So nobody called me? She looked down. Mom said it might upset you. The waitress came over, and Amy ordered toast she never touched. Once the woman walked away, Amy unlocked another set of messages. These were between Amy and Daniel. She had asked why he was buying a crib when Tessa's separation agreement should have included support from the baby's father. Daniel wrote, "It's complicated. The dates may line up with when she and I started talking again." Amy replied, "Talking? Daniel, don't start. Rachel and I were barely functioning. It happened once. We don't know anything yet." Farther down he had written, "If Noah is mine, Rachel will understand once he's here. She loves children. She won't punish a baby." I read that sentence twice. The second time the letter seemed smaller. "How long have you known?" I asked. "Since that message." "I thought he had told you." "You thought your brother told his wife he might have gotten his ex pregnant?" Amy winced. "No. I guess I didn't think very hard at all." My coffee arrived. I reached for the sugar and knocked the little metal container onto the floor. Packets slid beneath the next table. Amy bent to collect them. "Leave them," I said. She sat back up. "Send me everything," I told her. "I already did." My phone buzzed inside my bag. Amy rubbed the heel of her hand against one eye. "I should have called you before the shower." "Yes. I'm not asking you to forgive me." "Good." She nodded. That was the first useful thing anyone in Daniel's family had done. Apologize without trying to assign me the next task. I left the diner and sat in my car. For a while I watched people come and go from the pharmacy next door. A father lifted a sleeping toddler out of a shopping cart. An older woman argued with the automatic door. Ordinary Tuesday things. Then I called Daniel. "Did you sleep with Tessa?" There was a long scrape on his end like a chair moving across concrete. "Amy talked to you." "Answer me." "It happened once." "When?" "Rachel." "When?" 7 months ago. I counted backward even though I already knew. 2 months after Evie died. We were both falling apart. You had sex with your ex. I made a terrible mistake. Then you built her baby a room in my house. Because the baby might be mine. It was the first time he had said it plainly. Traffic moved past my windshield. A delivery van blocked the pharmacy entrance and somebody leaned on a horn. "Does Tessa know you expected me to help raise him?" I asked. "I didn't expect. You wrote that I would understand once he was here. I was trying to find a way through this without destroying everybody." I shut my eyes. "You held a baby shower in my house." I panicked. "You ordered cupcakes." He had no answer for that. The following week we received a second offer. The buyers, an older couple relocating to be near their grandchildren, offered $14,000 below the listing price and wanted a fast closing. They did not care about the nursery. They wanted the downstairs bedroom for the husband's woodworking equipment and asked for a credit to repair the back deck. Janelle called while I was packing files at Monica's kitchen table. "It's not the strongest number," she said, "but it's clean. Financing is solid, inspection window is short, and they can close in 4 weeks. 4 weeks. I pictured the pencil marks inside the pantry door where my mother had measured me every birthday until I turned 16. I pictured her asleep on the couch after chemotherapy, the television remote tucked beneath her hand. I pictured Evie's crib arriving in 3 flat boxes and Daniel swearing at the instructions while I laughed from the floor. "Can I call you back?" I asked. I drove to the house during the 2-hour access period arranged for me to collect personal property. Daniel's truck was in the driveway, but he wasn't home. Tessa was at a prenatal appointment. In the pantry, the pencil marks were still there. Rachel, age 9. Rachel, age 12. At 16, my mother had drawn a crooked star above the line because I complained I hadn't grown enough. I put both hands on the doorframe and cried so hard my nose started bleeding. I used a dish towel to stop it because the tissues had been moved. For 10 minutes, maybe more, I was certain I could not sell. Then Daniel came in through the garage. He found me sitting on the kitchen floor with the stained towel in my hand. "Ratch." His voice softened. "Look at you." He crouched a few feet away. "You don't have to do this." I wanted him to say he was sorry. Not sorry that I was crying. Sorry for the exact thing that put me there. We can take the house off the market, he continued. I'll tell Tessa she needs another plan after the baby comes. We can restore the nursery if that's what you need. If that's what I need. I'm trying here. Did you get the paternity test? He looked away. Her doctor said it would be easier after delivery. So she stays until then. She could have the baby any day. Once we know, we can make rational decisions. I wiped my nose and stood. You made every irrational decision already. Now you want me to wait for the results. He followed me into the dining room. If Noah is mine, what do you expect me to do? Abandon him? No. I expect you to be his father somewhere else. And if he isn't? There it was, the bargain he had not yet said out loud. If the child wasn't his, Tessa could go, the room could be painted again, and I could be expected to return. He doesn't have to be yours for this marriage to be over. Daniel caught the back of a chair. You don't mean that. I do. I called Janelle from the front porch and accepted the offer. Daniel came outside while I was still on the phone. Rachel, don't. Janelle asked. Are you sure? I watched Daniel come down the steps, one hand extended as if he could physically stop the word. Yes, I said. Send me the contract. 2 days later, the red pending strip appeared across the sign. That evening, Tessa went into labor. At 2:14 the next morning, Daniel sent a photograph to the Pierce family group. I knew because Linda added me again before sunrise. The picture showed a red-faced baby wrapped in a striped hospital blanket. Daniel's hand rested beside the child's head, his wedding ring visible near the edge of the frame. The caption said, "He's here. Mom and baby are doing well." No one used the word father. Amy removed me from the chat less than a minute later and texted separately. I'm sorry. Mom shouldn't have added you. I stared at the picture until my phone dimmed. Noah had dark hair flattened against his head and one fist pressed beneath his chin. He was small and blameless and had entered a mess built by adults before he took his first breath. I set the phone face down and went to work. At 9, Daniel called from the hospital. Tessa had the baby. I know. He's healthy. That's good. He waited, perhaps expecting me to ask how he felt when he held Noah. I couldn't do that for him. Her doctor wants her to rest, he said. We need to move the date. What date? The move-out date. She can't leave the hospital and start packing. Her things can be packed without her. Rachel, she just gave birth. I pinched the bridge of my nose. My computer screen showed a list of patients waiting for insurance authorization. Mrs. Keller's name was highlighted because someone had entered the wrong diagnosis code. How much time are you asking for? 2 weeks. No. 1 week. 3 days after she's discharged. Her sister or your family can help. Put the request through Grace. You sound like a landlord. And you sound surprised that deadlines still exist when they're inconvenient for you. He hung up. I gave him the 3 days. Not because he deserved them, and not because Linda left me a voicemail saying childbirth should be bigger than divorce. I did it because Tessa had stitches, Noah needed somewhere warm, and I could still make one decent decision without reopening my marriage. Grace made the extension conditional on written access for the inspection and a firm departure time. Daniel signed. The inspection found ordinary problems. Loose deck boards, an aging electrical panel, a slow drain in the upstairs bathroom. I agreed to a repair credit large enough to sting and small enough to keep the sale moving. Daniel argued about the credit anyway. You're giving away money, he said during a call with both attorneys. My money, I said. His attorney cleared his throat. Grace wrote something on a legal pad and slid it toward me. Let him talk. Daniel continued. The deck is fine. Your mother used it for 20 years. 3 boards are soft. So replace 3 boards. The buyers want the credit. Then find different buyers. Grace held up one finger, asking me not to respond. Daniel's attorney finally said, Daniel, the offer and inspection response are the titled owner's decisions. Your potential reimbursement claim is being preserved. This call is not a veto process. For once, the legal sentence was worth hearing in full. Daniel went quiet. Then he said, fine, and disconnected before anyone finished. Tessa returned to the house with Noah 2 days later. Her sister followed Daniel's truck in and helped carry an infant car seat, a hospital bag, flowers, and 3 packs of diapers upstairs. For one night, the blue nursery was used exactly as Daniel had imagined. The next morning, he took Noah for a cheek swab. Tessa had agreed to the test before the birth. Daniel later told Amy he did it because I had forced the issue, which was almost impressive. I had not requested a test, attended the appointment, or spoken to Tessa about paternity. But blaming me allowed him to avoid admitting that the question had existed long before I came home to the party. The results took 4 days. I learned they had arrived when Amy called during my lunch break. "Noah isn't his," she said. I set down my fork. "Are you sure?" Daniel sent me the report. 0% probability. Behind Amy, someone was talking over her. "Linda," I thought. "Why did he send it to you?" "Because Tessa is leaving, and he wants Mom and me to convince her to stay." That part surprised me. "Why?" Amy spoke away from the phone. "Mom, stop. I'm not asking her that." Then to me. "He says it shouldn't matter. He says he already bonded with Noah. That's between them." "I know." I picked up my fork but didn't eat. I had imagined feeling vindicated if the baby wasn't Daniel's. Instead, I felt tired, and then irritated with myself for being tired, as if I had failed to enjoy the proper ending. "Does Grace need the report?" Amy asked. "Only if Daniel spent marital money based on a lie he knew about. The affair is already admitted. I'm not building my divorce around a baby." "Okay." Before she hung up, Amy said, "I'm going over there. Tessa's sister can't get all the boxes in her car." "Amy." "Yeah. Make sure the rocking chair in Monica's garage stays out of this." "I will." The final walkthrough was scheduled for the following afternoon. Tessa was supposed to be gone by noon. When Janelle and I arrived at 2, a rented cargo van sat in the driveway. Tessa's sister was loading the last suitcase. Tessa stood on the porch holding Noah against her chest. She wore loose gray pants and moved carefully, one step at a time. Daniel stood near the front door with both hands in his pockets. They had clearly been fighting. "We have a walkthrough," Janelle said. Tessa nodded. "We're leaving." Daniel took one hand from his pocket. "You don't have to." Tessa turned on him. "Where would I stay, Daniel? The house belongs to her. I can get an apartment." "With what deposit? You put everything on that card." He glanced at me and Tessa noticed. "She knows about the money?" Tessa asked. "This isn't the time. You said the money was yours. It was our household account. You said she didn't care." Daniel stepped closer, dropping his voice. "Can we not do this in the driveway? You seem to like making decisions for women in that house and explaining them later." Tessa adjusted Noah's blanket. "I'm not doing that with my son. I should have enjoyed watching them turn on each other. Part of me did. Another part wanted them to leave so I could check the faucets and be done." Tessa looked at me. "I never told him Noah was definitely his. You let him believe it." "I said it was possible. You let him take down my daughter's name." Her mouth tightened. She looked toward the upstairs window. "Yes," she said. "I did." No excuse followed. I respected the absence of one more than I would have respected a speech. Her sister closed the van doors. Tessa went down the steps, paused beside me and said, "He told me you'd come around once Noah was here. He said you always took care of everyone." He was right about the second part. She waited for more. I had nothing else for her. Tessa strapped Noah into the car seat. Her sister drove away first and the cargo van followed. Daniel watched until both vehicles turned at the end of the street. Then he walked into the house as if he had forgotten Janelle and I were there. The nursery was nearly empty. Tessa had taken the new crib, the changing table, and Noah's clothes. 4 nail holes remained above the dresser where the blue letters had hung. On the closet shelf, someone had left a single newborn sock. Janelle checked the windows while I tested the bathroom faucets. Downstairs, Daniel sat at the kitchen table. When I entered, he held his phone in both hands. The paternity report was open on the screen. "I thought he was mine," he said. "I know. When I held him, I thought." He stopped and rubbed his thumb along the edge of the phone. It felt real. I opened the cabinet beneath the sink to make sure Tessa had removed her cleaning supplies. A bottle of baby-safe detergent remained. I put it on the counter. Rachel, can you sit down? We're doing the walkthrough. 5 minutes. I stayed standing. He looked worse than he had in weeks. His beard had grown in unevenly. There was dried formula on one shoulder of his shirt. I know I handled everything wrong, he said. Handled. I know. Bad word. He pushed his phone away. After Evie, I couldn't walk past that room. I couldn't look at you in there because I knew you were waiting for me to feel it the way you did, and I couldn't. I just wanted the door closed. So did I some days. Then Tessa came back. She needed me. She didn't look at me like I had failed at being a husband or a father. When she said the dates might line up, I thought maybe. He pressed both palms to his eyes. Maybe I'd get another chance without having to go through any of it again. I believed that part. It was also too late to help him. You wanted a replacement, I said. No. Not for Evie. For the life that hurt. He lowered his hands. I didn't understand that then. You understood enough to lie to me. I was afraid you'd leave. So you moved her in. I kept thinking I could make it work. I laughed once and it came out rough. You couldn't even make the story work. You told your mother I agreed, told Tessa the house was ours, and told yourself I'd raise the baby if he was yours. Daniel's eyes filled. I'll go to counseling. Real counseling. We can live somewhere else. We don't have to keep the house. The buyers close Friday, I said. Then after Friday. No. Rachel, please. No, my throat tightened around the word, and I had to clear it. Get counseling because you need it. Not because you think it's a receipt you can bring back to me. Janelle appeared in the doorway. Everything upstairs checks out. I picked up the bottle of detergent and handed it to Daniel. This is theirs. The closing happened Friday at 11 in a title company conference room. The buyers signed first. I signed after them. Daniel was not required to approve the sale itself, but his attorney had him sign the documents tied to the temporary agreement, escrow, and release of occupancy claims. The coffee on the sideboard had gone cold. He arrived late carrying a grocery bag. After the papers were complete, we met at the house to transfer the final keys. The new owners waited inside with Janelle while Daniel did one last walk through the empty rooms. He came out holding the grocery bag and a brass key. I found these behind the dresser, he said. Inside the bag were 3 wooden letters. V.I. I had kept the first E in my canvas tote. I didn't throw them away, Daniel said. He sounded as if that should count for something. Maybe, in the inventory he had started keeping of his mistakes, it did. Where were they? I asked. Behind the dresser. Tessa must have pushed the box back there. You took them down. I know. He looked into the bag. I should have put them back before you came home. You shouldn't have needed me to catch you. He nodded once. There was no argument left in him, but the lack of an argument did not make the exchange gentle. Behind the front window, one of the buyers carried a lamp into what had been our dining room. Daniel watched the man set it on the floor, move it 6 inches and set it down again. Daniel placed the key in my hand. He did not let go immediately. Where am I supposed to go? He asked. The question was so plain that I almost answered it. His mother's guest room. Amy's couch. A short-term rental near work. There were options. They simply were not mine to arrange. I pulled my hand free. You gave away a room that was never yours, I said. Everything after that was your choice. I took the bag and carried the key inside to the new owners. Our divorce was final 5 months later. The money Daniel spent on Tessa was counted against his share of the remaining marital assets, and it wiped out most of the reimbursement claim he had made for improvements to the house. We each kept our own retirement accounts. He kept his truck and assumed the balance on the card he had used for the nursery. Neither of us got everything we asked for. I signed the agreement at Grace's conference table and went back to work for the afternoon. Linda sent me a 4-page letter. She apologized for believing Daniel without calling me, and for using my miscarriage to shame me. I read it once and put it in the same folder as the final divorce decree. Amy apologized in person. After that, she stopped asking whether I forgave her. Daniel kept attaching personal messages to emails about property we had already divided. Grace asked his attorney to stop forwarding them. After that, the messages ended. I rented for 3 months, Then bought a 2-bedroom townhouse 12 minutes from the clinic. It had no perfect light, no mature maple tree, and no pantry door with my childhood height marks. It also had no room anyone had promised away behind my back. Monica helped me move on a rainy Saturday. Amy brought my mother's rocking chair from Monica's garage and carried it upstairs. When she asked if I needed anything else, I said no. She nodded, wiped rain from her glasses, and left. I donated the crib and the unopened baby supplies to a family shelter. I kept one blanket, the paper moon, and the wooden letters. The second bedroom became an office. On my first night there, I spent 40 minutes trying to assemble a flat-pack desk with the support rail backward. When I finally flipped it around, one screw rolled beneath the radiator. I was on my knees looking for it when the doorbell rang. "I brought tacos," Monica called from downstairs. "And the good drill because I don't trust you." "Fair," I called back. Before I went down, I set the 4 letters together on the shelf above the unfinished desk. Hey. My mother's rocking chair stood beside the window, without a ribbon tied around it. The paper moon rested on the seat, waiting for me to find the right hook. The doorbell rang again. I left the missing screw under the radiator, turned off the light, and went downstairs to let Monica in.